Alright folks, welcome back. Today is going to be about if and else. What are if and else? If and else are a way to make your code do something different. So let's say something has been happening, you have an orc is charging at your screen, the user doesn't do anything, and then they suddenly hit a button, and if or else decides whether they hit the orc or not. Uh, if and else are a fantastic way to control your program. In fact, that's what they're called. They're a control structure. We're going to cover all these typical mathematical operators today too. You can see here less than, greater than, less than or equal, or greater than or equal. We're also going to cover some higher level operators that you may not be familiar with, the and or operator, and we're going to talk about a different data structure, or actually it's called a primitive, a different variable type, which is a Boolean, which is basically just true or false. That's all there is to that. So what we're going to do is just kind of mess around. No specific project today. I think I'm just going to show you how these things work and get through this pretty quick. Well, I think I'm going to program the Mario Ghost, like from the Ghost Castle, later, but I'm going to work through that myself before I start making videos. So anyways, here we go. We have a screen set up here. You're running the setup function. Remember, this only happens once in processing, so you can set up your screen and get it how you want. So we got 600 by 600, and we're going to have a white background. Remember, colors are out of 255. If you specify only one number, it's going to just be grayscale. If you specify 3 numbers, it'll use red, green, blue. Okay, I always screw it up. I always do RBG, which doesn't make any sense. It's RGB. So 255, 255, 255 is the exact same color as just 255. But let's get to it. So let's make our draw function. Now remember, this function is very different. It's going to be repeated over and over and over again, probably something like 30 times a second, depending on how you set the frame rate. In this case, we're just running with processing's default frame rate, which is something like 30. I don't remember from the last video. So let's draw something, right? Let's put a picture on the screen. Let's put an ellipse, right? That's my favorite shape. And in this case, let's put something right in the middle of the screen. So width divided by 2, height divided by 2. And let's make it kind of goofy looking. Let's make it, 140 pixels by 210. Or these are the semi-major and major axes here. So we're going to make an actual true ellipse. And if we draw that, you shouldn't be very surprised. This picture is kind of boring. It's an ellipse at the center of the screen, taller than it is wide, standard stroking here, just a black outline, standard fill, white, very, very, very boring. What we're going to do is just start off with if and else. So let's make some decisions. Let's say, based on where the mouse is, change the color of the ellipse. I know. Don't pee your pants, right? This is going to be the most exciting thing you've ever seen in your life. But let's get if and else down here. So let's say if the mouse position, let's say the leftmost position, if that position is greater than the width of the screen, or half the width of the screen, let's change the color of the ellipse. So we're going to change the fill function. So we're going to fill it with, let's say, green. So no red, lots of green, no blue. Okay, so now we have an if statement going here, so our program can make a decision. Let's go ahead and run that. And you can see here it's going to show up exactly like what we thought, but as soon as my mouse creeps across halfway, boom, it turns green. And you might think to yourself, okay, well, I'll just go back to turn it white. Well, nope, that's not going to work because you never actually call this function again. You ran this if and only if the mouse is over on the right side of the pane. Well, there's a problem. Nothing happens if it goes back over. So what we'd like to do is say, well, if it's over here, paint it green. If it's over on the left, turn it back to white. Well, you got to tell the computer that. And so what we can do is use the else structure. So in other words, if this is not true, okay, so think of it in terms of true and false questions. Is the mouse on the other side of the screen? Yes? Well, then we'll do this. We're going to paint it green. Else means literally in any other case. So anytime this is false, we're going to do the else code. In this case, we'll turn things back to white. And so you can see here now we're going to have control and be able to toggle the color of this thing. So we can go back, forth, left, and right. So here the if is firing because it's true. Here the else is firing because the if is false. Okay? So these go together in a pair. You don't have to have an else, but the else will apply to the if directly in front of it. So let me show you what I mean. Let's put an if in an if. Yeah, I don't want to blow your minds here, but let's say if mouse y is greater than the height of the screen over 2. So we're on the bottom part of the screen. We're going to change the fill again. So I'm going to put curly brackets here. We're going to change the fill to be, let's say, a lighter green, or well, I guess in this case, a darker green. Let's go down to 150 units of green here. So let's see how this behaves now. So we have an if, and we have an if in the if. So what's going to happen here? So we load up the screen, and if we end up on the other side of the screen, our thing turns blue. And then it turns dark green. So we've actually broken the screen into quadrants. In fact, up here, my mouse Y is causing this to fail. So this fill remains. So I haven't, I keep this fill. If my mouse is over on the right side of the screen and down, I'm getting both this to be true, so I get into this if, so I get into this block of code. But now if I'm on the bottom half of the screen, this is true, and the fill covers up the other fill. Okay? So it's all about being true. If I go back to the other side of the screen, where'd my window go here? If I go back to the other side of the screen, it immediately goes back to white, even though I'm on the bottom half of the screen, which might be unintuitive, but because I'm on the bottom half of the screen, you'd think this one would go, right? I'm greater than half the height. Well, the problem is we nested the ifs, so you don't really get to see it because this one has to fire first. In other words, we have to be on the right side and the bottom. So the only way to turn the screen dark green is to be in this bottom quadrant, I think what you guys would call quadrant 4. The only way to turn it light green is to be in quadrant 1, and then it's going to be white on either side, even though you'd think it would turn it dark green down here, but it won't. Okay, let's get fancier here. This isn't so cool yet. Let's make it so that each quadrant does something. So let's get rid of these ifs. They're kind of boring. Let's make it so that each quadrant does something. So let's say if mouse X is greater than, let's see, I don't know, let's say less than the middle of the screen. So less than width over 2. So we're going to say, look, this is the left side of the screen. Okay, so now we're on the left side, but we want to specify into quadrants. So we want to say another thing. We want to say also if it's on the top part of the screen. So we're going to code for quadrant 2 here. So let me put a little comment there. Catching mouse in quadrant 2. So this is true. It has to be on the, the left side of the screen, but it also has to be at the top. So now we want to say two things, and that's where we get fancy. We can use the AND operator. And the AND operator says that both conditions have to be true. In this case, this has to be less than the height divided by 2. Okay, so now we have two conditions in our if. We can say if the mouse is here and here. So it's only going to work if both of those are true. So we're going to say, let's change the fill. Let's make it red, just for giggles here. We can say catch the mouse in quadrant 1. Well, how do we code for that? Well, if the mouse X is on the right side, so it's greater than the width of the screen, and again the mouse Y is less than half the height. So we're talking about quadrant 1. So we're on the top right, and we're going to change the fill. Let's make it, I don't know, who knows what. Let's just pick some random numbers here. Let's pick 1, 2, 3, 4, and 200. I wonder if do you think you can predict what color that's going to be? That's going to be a lot of red and a lot of blue. So probably kind of a purplish. Let's catch the mouse in quadrant 3. So we say mouse X, let's see, quadrant 3 is lower left. So we want mouse X to be less than, again, the width over 2. and we want it to the mouse Y to be greater than the height over 2. So you can see here we're just messing around with greater than and less than. Okay, let's set the fill. Oh, let's make it blue. Or green, blue, kind of a dark blue, I don't know. And then finally, this is probably getting old for you guys, catch the mouse in quadrant 4. That would be only if the mouse is greater than the width over 2, and if the mouse Y is also greater than the height over 2. Now, barring any spelling errors or semicolon errors, let's make this one, I don't know, whatever color this is. Who knows? We're just making stuff up. So let's run the code. And now we have an ellipse that's red. Interesting. Interesting, interesting. Move over here, we get a different color. Move down here, we get kind of an orange. Move back over here, we get a blue. And so now we have complete control based on what quadrant of the screen we're in. This isn't very interesting, right? Because all we're doing is changing the color. But remember, we're just getting an idea for how if and else work. So we've looked at and, we've looked at the greater than symbols. You could use greater than or equals if you want to make sure that we can function on the screen. I wonder if we can trick it and find that exact halfway point where it wouldn't work perfectly. We've learned if and else a little bit, and so next time I'm gonna get into something a little bit more fancy. I'm gonna try and program the ghost from Mario so that we can look at it and move, kind of juke the ghost out, or run away from it and see if it can catch us. Thanks.